in a series of webinars that we are doing today here from Moscow. For those of you who have been with us, welcome back. The subject is again going to be kind of lower level, primary level learners. Later on this afternoon we'll be doing a few webinars I should say, concerned with teaching at slightly higher levels. So my greetings to you wherever you are in the Federation. We here in Moscow are having a lovely, crisp, sunny November morning. It is actually rather nice weather. I hope wherever you are, the weather finds you. The weather is at least what you would like it to be, whatever that happens to be. Just a quick couple of points. Forgive me for those of you who've heard it before, but we have some new people joining us here. If you have any technical questions, any questions about certificates, any questions or issues to do with the settings, the sound, the video, whatever that might happen to be, please address those in Russian. My colleague Svetlana is here next to me and she'll be dealing with any questions of that kind of nature. So please address those in Russian. Any questions or comments that are addressed to me, I would be grateful if they were done in English. So that I can keep an eye on them. I'm watching down the right-hand side of my screen. I can see the chat applet, and I will try as much as I can to focus on that and address those things immediately. You can also address comments or questions to us that I will deal with at the end of this particular webinar. So whichever way you choose, please feel free to do so. If there are issues that we cannot get into because of time, or maybe because they're slightly outside the scope of what we're doing now, I will, towards the end, I will give you an email address at which you are very welcome to contact me, and not because I know all the answers, but normally because I know people who do. And I will be very happy if you have any questions or issues to try and find you an answer to those, and I'll give you the email later on. I'll do so later on because some people are still joining us and I want to make sure everybody gets it. So I'll do that towards the end. If I forget, please remind me, because occasionally I do forget and I don't want that to be the case. So that is the technical side of things kind of out of the way. For those of you who I have not met before, either in webinars or as we travel around the Federation, my name is Steve. I work as an English language teaching consultant and teacher trainer for Express Publishing, and we are here today in the offices of our friends and partners here in Russia, Prosvещение, with whom we have had the great pleasure of doing many joint projects, many of which you will be familiar with in your schools. This webinar is designed to fulfill an obligation we have educationally to make sure that we provide our colleagues and our customers with information and support, and we're very happy to undertake this obligation, and this is why I am here today. The subject of this particular webinar is kind of twofold. What we wanted to talk a little bit about today are young learners examinations. Some of you will be familiar with them, some of you will not, and at the beginning I will give you a little bit of information about young learners in general. I should make it very, very clear right from the beginning that the Young Learners exams are not run by Prosvещение and they are not run by Express Publishing. They are Cambridge English Assessment, and I will talk a little bit more about where you can find information about them online. These exams are designed to be taken by young learners of English up to the age of 12. They are broken down essentially into 3 stages. You can see those on the screen in front of you: starters, movers, and flyers. If you wish to know more technical details about which category of learner should take which exam, please do visit their website. They have lots of very, very useful information there. What I will tell you now, because it's relevant to our discussion, is, as I said, the examinations are limited to learners up to 12 years of age. That's why they're young learners exams. And the linguistic level of the highest level, which is flyers, is an A2 level exam. Now, in the past, we have talked about YLE in webinars, and I've usually taken movers as my kind of level to discuss with you. So today I wanted to take it a little bit further, and I have chosen examples from the flyers level. How does Express Publishing fit into this? Well, what we do is we provide books. These are the books on the screen in front of you now, which can be used to help prepare learners for these examinations. This is how we fit into this equation. As I said, we do not design the exams. We merely understand that there is great interest in these examinations and that they are exams taken around the world, and we help provide exam practice books for the exams. What we also do in a lot of our primary material, and this is something else I'll be showing you in my examples, is within our course books designed for learners within this age group and this linguistic group, we also make sure that there are activities within our course books, and this goes, by the way, for books produced by Express Publishing and books produced in cooperation with Prosvещение, that practice skills and task types that are related to the exam. So that is how, as publishers, we are connected to this particular examination. Express Publishing also, well, it started off, in fact, as language schools. We have our own language schools, and therefore we are not just interested in the publishing side of things, we are also interested in the educational side of examinations and language learning. We have to we wear both hats, as it were. And what we have found in our language schools is certainly we send learners for these examinations, but also we use the material, the skills builders that you see on the screen, as supplementary material in our classroom to help develop certain language skills amongst our learners. And we have found that these have proved to be very popular among our learners in that they provide a change from normal working course books. They also provide very good feedback for teachers who can see how learners are managing when they are asked to deal with language which isn't necessarily what they learned in the last lesson. So it helps to guide them in terms, it becomes a more formative thing in that then it lets teachers know if the learners are okay with the vocabulary, if they're okay with the structures, if they can put sentences together, if they can recognize grammatical function of language, of certain elements of language. So there's a lot of feedback that our teachers get from using these books, not just as practice tests, but as a kind of supplementary material in the classroom. Just to finish this introduction before I move in, what I'll do is I'll talk about both. I will show you through the exam and what's required, but I will also talk to you a little bit about ways we can use the material from the exam as a teaching tool, as a way of promoting language use, and how we can also slowly prepare our learners for the examination from course books. So there's a number of things I would like to discuss with you. Just very quickly about the exam. Many of you will be familiar with the Cambridge English Assessment Suite of exams. Some of you will not necessarily be familiar with the Young Learners exam. Let me just make a very quick couple of points about that. The exam is designed for a number of things. Obviously, it's designed to test learners' level of English. That goes without saying. It's a language exam. But what they've done, and one of the reasons we like it very much, is that they have borne in mind that the way that learners work, and they have tried to avoid making testing a frightening experience for learners. Everything about the exam is designed to be supportive while at the same time having very clear language goals. And this we find, I personally find it to be a great way of introducing learners to the world of assessment. Remember that a lot of, in the higher levels, a lot of exams become problematic and a lot of marks are lost. Not so much because of learners' linguistic ability, but because of the psychology, if you like, of examinations. Learners tend to look at exams as, in a way, an opportunity to be punished for not knowing something or for forgetting something. But it is equally arguable, disappeared for a second, it is equally arguable that our learners need to look at exams as an opportunity to show what they know. And this is where young learners' examinations can come in. It's an opportunity for learners to show what they know, to benefit from that, to be able to demonstrate what they know in an environment which is very child-friendly. And the final point on that, because you'll see it as we go through, but the final point is essentially with the young learners exams, learners don't fail. What essentially they get is for each of the parts of the paper, and you'll be familiar with those, reading, listening, speaking, so on and so forth. They get a kind of grade in the form of little shields. So nobody gets a failing grade. There is a grading, so if a learner is exceptionally good, they can see they're exceptionally good. They'll also see that there are areas they need to work on and they need to improve, but you don't actually fail it. What this exam therefore does is it encourages them to show what they know. It also introduces them to the world of examinations. The fact that they will have to sit and work on their own, how to deal with time, how to get through things, how to follow instructions, how to work on your own without necessarily the teacher being there for you at that particular moment, and introduces them to that concept in general as well in the classroom. So there's a number of very useful things, both linguistically and in a more broad sense, that can be gained from these examinations. And I stress before we go any further that we have no financial interest in those examinations. Just to make that very, very clear, we do not sell them. We have no connection with them in that sense. So just to make sure that you all understand that I'm coming to this from a methodological point of view and an area of interest rather than trying to promote them. If you wish to find out more about the exams, as I said, you are very welcome to go to their website where they do have a huge amount of information available to you, which is information I use as well. As I said, I'm going to take some of the examples from flyers because I wanted you to see the top level which learners are expected to reach in this system of exams. If you wish to look at other levels, you are welcome to look at our website. You're also very welcome, of course, to go to their website where they also have examples of the tests at various levels for you to see. I'm focusing on flyers today because I wanted to show you the top level at A2, and that's what we'll look at. If we have time to at the end, you are of course welcome to ask any questions not covered in the seminar. So let us move into some information specifically about flyers. Now, one of the things you can find out online, and you can see at the bottom of this particular slide the source of this information. I give it you A, for you to know that it has been researched, and B, for you to have that. If you wish to Google it, then you can go online and you can get the information directly from them. What I'm going to give you is a summary of certain points. Every level of the exam builds on the previous. So all the information that learners need to learn for flyers and movers is also relevant for starters and movers is also relevant for flyers as well. So there's a kind of cumulative thing going on. I'm going to talk about the things they have to specifically learn for flyers. If you wish to look at the other levels, please go online and have a look there. The things that they need to know, and I'm going to flick through these things. Your language teachers, you understand what this means when it's in front of you in terms of your teaching and in terms of the linguistic level of the children. This is why I'm sharing this with you, not because you don't know what the tenses are. I know. Quite often you tell me about it. So things like, and I'm going to flick through these because there's quite a few of them. Things like, for example, past continuous. They have to be aware of that when they go to flyers level. They don't have to use it at the lower levels. These are things specifically they must learn for flyers. Present perfect. So you can see we are getting into some reasonably complex grammatical areas, the use of present perfect. And notice please again, not just in the kind of affirmative, but also in the interrogative as well. They are supposed to be able to ask questions in it. Be going to, you know what that is. As I said, I'm not going to stop on all of these. The use of will, future concepts, obviously. But we're getting into areas as well, things like modals and stuff as well. So you've got mights going on there. You've got may coming up. I'm just going to flick through them because there's quite a lot. Shall in its sense of suggestion. So shall we have a picnic in the park? Shall we do this? That kind of use of it. There are other uses that they're not tested in this particular exam. Could, got that going on as well, should, and to know the difference between them. And then some other structures not connected to verbs. Again, these are taken, this is a summary from the examiner's handbook. So things like question tags, which are not covered at the lower levels, how to use adverbs, and of course their position within the sentence, conjunctions, if clauses, zero conditionals in this particular case, clauses to do with place, temporal clauses, all kinds of stuff going on. So you can see that although it is, and you'll see it in a second now when we move into the exam, although in terms of its appearance and in terms of the way, the rubrics, the way it asks its questions, it is a child-friendly exam. Please note that at A2 level, the content, the linguistic content, is sound. That this is a demonstration of really quite a good command of some complex structures within English. So I wanted to make, and the reason I shared it with you is because I wanted you to understand that this is a serious exam in terms of its linguistic content. The topics that are covered, now these topics are covered pretty much in all of the levels of the exam, starters and movers as well. They cover these topics, and I don't think there'll be any surprise to you, those of you working at primary level. I don't think there'll be any particular surprise to you in terms of these topic areas, nor do I think there would be anything that would trouble you particularly. These are things that we normally cover at primary level because they are concepts that children can readily understand and communicate. Materials are things are made of, things like wood, metal, things like that. That is not so much covered at the lower levels. I think they mention example things like something could be silver or gold as well, things that things are made of, but very basic, not terribly scientific terms. Don't worry about that, but things that being able to say that something is made of a common material is something they would be able to do as well. Numbers, so on and so forth. The rest of it is very, very straightforward, and you'll see as we go through now the kind of areas that they will have to look at. So let's move on from that. Again, if you'd like to look into this in more detail, please do go to their website. You will find, don't worry, I'm going to put some more examples on the screen any moment now. If you go to the website, you look at their handbook, you will also find lots of lists of vocabulary. You can actually find a list of all the expressions, all the vocabulary learners are supposed to know, both at the individual levels and cumulatively. So please do go there if you'd like to double check that in detail. Obviously, I'm not going to show that to you now because there'd be far too much of that, and it would not be something that you could take in. But if you are preparing learners or you're thinking about the exam, that information is available, and you can find it on the Cambridge English Assessment website in great detail. So let's get into the question now of what the exam looks like and how we work through it. I will also, when it's relevant, be taking examples from the various course books and task types that you would normally find in a course book that would be relevant to this kind of activity as well. There are a number of sections to get through, so bear with me, but if we're going to talk about it, we should talk about it properly, and I'll try and make teaching tips as well as we go through it. This, remember, is flyers. This is the top level. This is the first one. The first section deals with listening. Now, I should make it very, very clear that when we do listening at these levels, both in the exam itself and when we prepare material, please note this is from our books. This is from our exam practice book. When we prepare these, we are very careful to follow the correct format. And the reason I'm explaining this is so that you know what your students or your own children would expect in the exam. So the level of language is limited to the target language that would be available in the handbook. Also, the pace is slowed down. Now, whenever we have this discussion about listening, there are some people who believe that you know, all listening should be native level. But to be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, that is I believe, not a valid argument. If you are speaking to somebody, you as language teachers, when you address students who you know do not have a native level in English, you automatically adjust the level of your conversation. So when we're doing the young learners, when we're preparing the practice tests and when they do the actual exam, the way the language is spoken is very much geared to the level of English they're supposed to possess. So it's made simple, straightforward. They will also build in things like repetition. So if they're given instructions, the text itself will include repetition of information sometimes to make sure that learners can actually follow what they're supposed to do. This is not an exam about catching people out. It's an exam about supporting so learners can show what they know, and that's a very, very important thing to remember. It has a very positive relationship to them. So in this, basically what the learners have to do is they will hear description of a scene, and what they have to do in terms of answering the question is simply draw lines to match the people to the names. So they listen to descriptions and they just have to match. And that's the exam task. Now, in terms of preparing learners and in terms of how this can be useful in the classroom, this image and this whole activity has a lot of language that you could exploit. So if you were using it as a supplementary course rather than just as exam preparation, all the primary teachers who have joined us for this webinar will be very much aware that there's a lot going on linguistically here. So you would have words for description, description of buildings, descriptions of people. You could talk about, for example, and elicit hair color, which is quite obvious there. Clothing that they're wearing, color of clothing that they're wearing. And then, of course, you have activities. You have objects to describe. There's the cat down the front there. There's the young lady with the school bag. There's someone who's, in terms of activities, somebody is writing something, somebody's riding a bicycle, somebody's maybe ordering some food in the cafe there, or a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. The girl at the front there is stroking the head of the cat. So what you would do in the classroom if you're using this just to develop language skills is before you do any listening, before you do anything else, you would ask learners in the classroom to brainstorm and describe everything they can. Now you might want to make that into a competition. That's a great thing to do. So for example, you could divide the class into small groups, pairs maybe, or individuals, depending on what you like, but it'd be kind of fun to do it in pairs or small groups. Give them a very limited time, let's say a minute, and then ask them just to write down in English everything they can see going on. Or you could give them headings, you know, like descriptions, people, things we're doing, and then they can try and write down as many as they can, and you can have a kind of competition to see who can find the most. Another nice suggestion for using this particular activity in a more fun way is to make it possible for learners, to play a kind of memory game. So what you would do is you would give the learners a minute, again, no more than that, to look at the text. Then they would close their books, and you have a competition where they have to tell you as much as they can remember about the picture in front of them. And that, of course, hello, Anna. That, of course, is all about getting learners to use their memory to approach things, to be proactive when they're faced with information. Because if they are going into the exam, learners need to be looking at it and thinking about it before they actually start doing the listening or whatever. So that's the exam training part as well. That when learners are faced with the task, A, they know what the task is asking of them. You know, that they practice that side of it. B, that they are already actively engaging with it. They're thinking about it and how they might answer it. And that memory game is something you can play with many, many of the tasks in this particular exam. And of course, this idea of guessing and predicting is something that will be very, very useful for them in exams as they move further forward through the school. Now, if you're thinking of preparing learners for the exam, I just took this. This is from a lower level, but because I wanted to show you, I've taken examples from various different levels of primary. This is from quite a low level. But what you can do in any classroom, in any lesson, whenever you have like a story, usually stories at these low levels, you can ask learners to predict, you can ask learners to guess, you can get them to describe. Again, you can get them to look and then close their books and try and remember. Anything that gets the learners using their brains just that little bit more is going to help them retain the language, even if they get things wrong. Getting things wrong and realizing a mistake actually makes that information more memorable. So whenever you're faced, if you're preparing learners for young learners exams, or if you just want to make it a bit more active, please remember that this kind of prediction and brainstorming a text is something you can do in any lesson, and at primary level it's highly advisable that you do generally, because what will happen then, and this is a very interesting point I think someone's mentioned, is that when you go into the text here, or when you go into the listening in the case of the young learners exams, learners already have a very clear idea of the kind of thing they're likely to hear. That builds their confidence, and it also makes it easier for them to interpret what they're hearing or reading and understand it and build comprehension. Comprehension is built on prediction. We read, we listen, we predict what's going to come next, we see if we were right, we see if we're wrong, and then we start building comprehension like that. Another thing that happens in flyers is they get another listening. Now this particular one is looking for things like spellings and other information. So it's looking that learners can hear specific information. So learners will hear and they have to fill in the gaps. It's usually like a notebook or a short announcement, something like that. But the emphasis here is on being correct. Learners are expected to spell things correctly, to write words, numbers, etc. in the gaps. So this is listening for specific information, which of course is a skill learners need to develop. It's also a skill that is tested in all exams, and it's a skill that's used in real life. So when you're going through here, obviously when they do the listening, they need to spell it right and they need to get the numbers right. This way you can work with this as a kind of training, again, is prediction. But now we're not predicting so much we're not talking about what we can see. We're beginning to think about words that are likely to be the correct answer. And what that means is our learners are starting to spot what would make a complete phrase, what would make a complete sentence. They're starting to think about parts of speech. What would be a logical thing to go in that particular gap? And then they can use the picture to help them make those predictions, because that's why the picture is there. Remember I said that this is about supporting learners. What you can do with them is before they listen, and you should, I think, is to predict, what do you think it's going to be? And then we predict, you can make a note on the board. Again, you can make it a competition. You can maybe divide the class into 2 teams, they predict, you write it on the board, and the team that predicted correctly is going to be the winner in this particular case. It's a great way of getting them to think about vocabulary, but vocabulary belonging to a particular functional group. So is it a noun? Is it something like this? All of these things, what kind of noun might it be? Maybe drawing materials in this particular case. If it's a number, what's it a number for? What's it logically going to be? All of these designed to get learners actively engaging with the text. Now, doing listening activities is nothing new to teachers, but this idea of always predicting, please train your learners in this. It makes sense. Let me give you an example. If you are traveling around the world and you are maybe in an airport and you wish to know the gate that you're going to, gates are expressed as a number. So if you're in the airport, maybe you don't speak the local language, maybe the announcements are not a language that you can understand, you know to listen out for the name of the city you're going to, or the country you're going to, depending, and you know to listen for a number. It's this kind of training. It has a very, very practical application. It helps learners focus on what's necessary to find and not to panic or worry if they don't understand absolutely everything. This is a very important, and this is why they do it. So whenever you're in a course book, for example, as you are here, you can go through this particular activity and predict. So if we take the one about the eagle, the color, it's going to be brown or what colors might an eagle be? Is blue going to be a good option? Probably not. What color might an eagle be? Might it be black? Well, it could be. Yeah. So learners learn what's likely to come up, what would make logical sense in terms of the idea and in terms of the language. It's a wonderful thing to teach them to do, and it takes 2 seconds. It really shouldn't take too long. And what eventually will happen then is that learners will come used to automatically predicting, and that's where you want to get. You want to get to automatic prediction. So they go through, they predict. Whenever you do listening, please, please, please do that. It's a very important thing to do. The next one here, again, is to draw lines and connect. Thank you very much. You're very nice. We're waiting for you coming. I am very happy to go anywhere. And as you will know, I've traveled around Russia over the years and have been to many, 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 many cities. And unfortunately, we can't get to all of them, which is why we do these webinars. But trust me, we try to get around as many as we possibly can. So in part 3 of the listening, we're looking for detailed information. And basically, the learners have to match up the information with the picture. This particular activity here in front of you is an absolute dream in terms of language teaching. Obviously, it's got its exam focus, but at the same time, there is so much generation of language you can do with this particular activity. So if you take these various places on the right-hand side of the screen, you've got the post office, you've got a factory, bookshop, if I can see very well. I'm not wearing my glasses. Hotel, supermarket, etc. What kinds of things do we buy in these places? What kind of activities go on in these places? We get students to brainstorm. These are great things to do to brainstorm. So, for example, you could take the word supermarket, write it on the board, and then just generate as many words as you can, a kind of word map of a web, as many words as you can connected with supermarket. Now, it doesn't have to be just, for example, food you can get in a supermarket, which of course it may be. It may be, when do you go to the supermarket? So maybe if you say supermarket, many people think Saturday, because Saturday is a day that people go to the supermarket. So we might do that. Maybe some students don't like going to the supermarket with their family, so they may go boring. That's okay. This kind of free association is a great way of revising vocabulary. And please remember that if you have a class of kids all associating and calling out their words connected with a specific stimulus, in this case a type of shop or service, the other children in the class are listening. So it may be words that they didn't know, it may be words that they have forgotten or had never come across before, and they're going to get exposed to that language and really in a very, very quick and very easy and very straightforward way. Also, of course, if they start to talk about it more, you're going to get into tenses and structures that may be important as well. A lot of language from a very simple activity, I hope you agree. And of course, there's the exam practice where they are listening to where he's going to get the various things he needs to shop from. Okay, let us move on. Some of these points are going to be similar, so I'll speed through some of them. So again, here what we're looking for is, this is a little bit more cognitively demanding. In this case, they're looking for specific information again, and they have to tick the right picture. Now, this is a very important practice, first and foremost, for learners who are to learn to obey exam instructions. So they have to be very clear what they're doing here, and this is a great way of learning that in exams we have to do tasks in a certain way. Obviously, if you tick more than one box, you're wrong. Doesn't matter if the right answer is in there as well. You only have to tick one box. You have to listen carefully. You have to make sure that what you hear is justified completely, so that it's not just a room, you tick the room, it's a specific room with a specific activity, and learners, if you like, have to check that what they select answers all those criteria, so that they're learning again to listen for specific information and to kind of double check the choices they're making there. It's a wonderful thing to do. Again, no need to mention it, but there's obviously tons of stuff that can be discussed. Again, a great memory test. Look at it for a minute. What kind of things can you remember? You've got use of verbs going on there. You've got people playing, drawing, riding. I can see at the top of my head here, going to school. You can generate so much language, so much grammar in this kind of activity, just in this format. It's absolutely wonderful. Let us move on. Now, in terms of listening for specific information, which those activities were based on, and in terms of, for example, listening for names, listening for numbers, there is a certain amount of phonemic awareness that is necessary. Even if the name is spelt for you, you have to understand the relationship between the sound of the letter and the writing of the letter. So in preparation for the exam, a little bit of emphasis on things like phonics, a little bit of emphasis on things like spelling. So dictation, this kind of thing, a great way of helping learners prepare for these exams, because they have to learn what they hear and what they write have to match up. So you can also use the practice in that sense as well. Do not be frightened of dictation at primary level. Listening for descriptions, obviously, course books contain this kind of practice too. The next one is one of my favorite ones, actually. This is where they have to listen and color, which is a wonderful task. I wish university exams could be quite this much fun. They have to listen and color certain things a certain color. They're given instructions. Usually the instructions are given twice. Certainly at the lower levels where they have this kind of exam, they are. So you get, color the snowman or color the tree green. Let's do that. What? Color the tree green. So this information is repeated. They're given time to color. And basically what it does is it shows that they can follow instructions. One presumes they know the name of colors. They have to be able to identify objects. So there's a lexical vocabulary element there. But very importantly, this idea of following instructions and obeying instructions in the classroom going on there. So these are things you can practice in various forms in the lesson. Even something like Simon Says is this idea of following instructions. Simon says, if Simon doesn't say it, no, it's not a proper instruction. Listening doesn't have to be listening and coloring. We do that in our material, but then things like listen and follow, listen and obey. What does it say? Stamp your feet, clap your hands. Yes, you're quite right. Some of these are taken from, or I took these from a wide variety of course books. Some are from Spotlight, some are from Starlight, some are from other Material Express Publishing producers. Some is co-productions with Prosvещение. I just wanted to show you that within primary courses, A, there is preparation for young learners' exams, but B, that the essence of those activities, the things that learners can learn and the language they can produce is available in the practice exams and available in the course books, and there's a kind of symbiosis going on there. Zooming through now, we're coming into reading and writing. Yay. So at flyers level, you'll see it gets a little more complex at other levels, and that's one of the things I wanted to show you. Here, basically what learners are looking at is choosing the right word to fit the definition. Notice, please, that all of the questions, as it were, the rubric is essentially definition. Choose the right word and write them. So the example it gives, people usually stay in these when they're on holidays or on a business trip, a hotel. So what they're looking at is definition and finding the word. And that's, again, it's a great activity. It's about building lexical awareness. It's about the meanings of words and being able to express the meanings of words, synonyms, being able to give explanations if maybe you've forgotten the word, because there's the reverse true here. If you forget the word, you could say, if you forget the word hotel, for argument's sake, the place where you stay on holiday or the place where business people go. So we're giving learners here a bit of flexibility in terms of using the language. So what you can do in the classroom is this kind of reverse engineering sometimes. We often teach the words. Sometimes what we can do, instead of giving them the word, is we take target vocabulary and we give a description of it, and our learners have to guess which word it is. On the left-hand side, you have picture dictionary. My video partially covers the illustrations. Okay, the corner that's covered, there's nothing there going on. So for example, the desk. The teacher could say, okay, this is where you sit to do your homework. A desk. Or, again, make it into a game. Get children to describe the words, and the other students have to decide which word they're talking about. It's a great way of revising vocabulary. You can make it a game, for example, with flashcards, a random game. If you take flashcards, which you have, you get learners to randomly select. It's a bit like the game Taboo, where they have to describe what something is, and the other learners have to guess. It's a great way of having fun, developing awareness of what words mean. I love it as a particular activity. Here, we're looking a bit more at discourse management. So in this particular activity, learners are given a rubric where they're basically told they have a conversation. They get part of the conversation. As you can see, mostly in the form of questions is what they get. And then the learners are expected to decide what the appropriate response would be to those. So what you're getting here is an awareness of discourse management and what appropriate responses are to appropriate questions. Now, again, you can use this as a teaching tool. If, for example, you covered up the responses, you could discuss what probable responses there might be. So, for example, they're talking about a friend's holiday. So when David says, how did you get there? How might Holly respond? She could say, by aeroplane, by boat, we went by car. Yeah, by car, it doesn't have to be long sentences. So what you're doing, again, is you're using this activity to generate more language than they would actually need in the exam itself. And then they will go on and answer those questions armed with that information. But at the same time, you're generating and you're revising language. It's a lovely activity. Part 3, they are given words. Most of them are, it's basically looking at lexical awareness again, and they have to read the text, they have to fill in the word. What they're a little bit more here, this is flyers, they are obviously also thinking about the grammatical function of particular words, what kind of grammar would fit. Is it a noun, is it a verb going on, what have you, is it an adjective, what would be appropriate here. So there is a certain grammatical awareness which is necessary for doing this. And again, so if learners do an activity like this, you discuss what kinds of words might fit. So you're focusing their attention on types of words. Don't worry, we've got about 3 minutes left and I'll get through it quite nicely. This goes through any gap-filling activity. Please remember, any gap-filling activity you do, discuss with your learners other options, the kinds of words that might fit, so that when they're also producing language, they are sensitive to that too. This particular one, the next one, part 4, is more grammatical than lexical. They're looking at functional words. You've got some conjunctions going on there. You've got some adverbs, etc., articles, prepositions. So again, there's a test on grammatical awareness. They have to complete the story. You understand how that works. So again, the focus is on function of things that are missing, and of course, grammar. They have to be able to understand how grammar works, how words are put together, what things go where in a sentence. So if they make mistakes in an activity like that, you need to discuss why that can't be. Where would that kind of word normally go? Does it have a position in the sentence? Does its function work there? It's a great way of introducing learners to the practical application of grammatical rules. Part 5 is basically, it's reading comprehension. They have to go through the text where they will be asked to freely write an answer. Essentially, it's synonyms. They're looking at ways of expressing what is in the text slightly differently. Here, it's teaching them advanced exam techniques. It's getting them again to focus on synonyms. It's reading comprehension. It's a wonderful thing indeed to do. You can help them, for example, if you're doing reading texts in the class by summarizing. Verbal summaries, written summaries is a great way of helping them prepare for that. Part 6, we're almost there, guys. Part 6 is open-close test. They have to write one word on each line. Some of those words will be functional, some will be lexical. and basically they have to understand the story as they go through. So again, brainstorming the kinds of things it might be, the kinds of things that would be expected. Ma'am, where you say, you say that your son is 12 and it's a difficult test. I fully agree with you, but the whole point is that if you take a test, you prepare for it beforehand. And this is what we're talking about. This is an A2 level test, and learners are expected to be able to answer those questions, but they will have been trained in order to answer it. So please remember that part of the whole conversation. I have about a minute left. I've really got to bring this to a close. Part 7 is writing a story, a very simple story, 20 or more words. This is one of the reasons why in our primary level books we focus on writing and building writing skills. We do it through providing models, analyzing models, and getting learners to do simple writing tasks. This goes to what the lady was saying. If you have not practiced writing, it would be very difficult to go into flyers. We take writing very seriously, and there is practice there with models. We brainstorm it. We build up our writing skills in order to be able to go to a text like that. We brainstorm ideas, and then we shape them into some kind of structure. We think about the grammar involved. Writing is a very important thing to learn, and this is why we put it in primary level books. Just to finish, a couple of words about the speaking. The speaking is the learner and the examiner. One thing they'll do is talk about similarities and differences. The examiner has a different picture. The learner will hear statements about the examiner, like, in my picture, grandfather is eating pizza. And the child will be expected to say, in my picture, grandfather is eating a sandwich. So they can reflect the structure, changing the particular object. There, you basically just need lots of practice at spotting differences and remembering you can repeat a lot of what the examiner says. The next speaking activity is gap filling, information gap. The examiner and the student exchange information based on very simple questions. Where, who, how old, etc. The examiner starts asking questions, and then the student asks questions following. So the student will have already heard the kinds of questions they're supposed to ask. They don't have to write anything down, they just have to ask and answer. So it's about using question words, it's about using, the interview would require them to know interrogatives, affirmatives, and negatives. It's very important that they learn those as well and they practice them. And that, coming towards the end, this is the last activity, sequencing a story. They're given story prompts about grandma's busy day. They have to say what grandma does. So here you can see how practice, like we talked about right at the beginning, in verbs, in description, in simple objects is very, very important. In the class, you can have a great time with this. The students develop the story, they talk about it, maybe they eventually write it down, they practice sequencing, they practice tenses, they practice use of vocabulary, as well as oral practice as well. And you can use any story in any book, this is from the internet, from the IWB, to practice this idea of sequencing and discussing what happens in a story as they go forward. So to finish, one second. This is quite, oh gosh, lots of questions. Go to the questions. How do you get the certificate? Svetlana has explained that. How do you organize creative activity during testing? What I've mentioned here is that you can use the test creatively to develop language use. Of course, ultimately, when you do the test, you have to do the test the way the test is designed and answer the questions accordingly. So please don't confuse the two things. Creativity is in the teaching to the test itself is the test, and they have to do it. How to test readiness, oh gosh, there we go. How to test readiness for creative application of knowledge and skills. Feedback, formative assessment. Whenever you do an activity, and this is why the Young Learners books are great for practicing language, they will give you the feedback and they will tell you about the readiness. So if they know the vocabulary, you'll know they'll know it. If they talk about the verbs and the activities confidently, you know they're okay. If they can't do that, that's information for the teacher, and you can help make them ready by teaching them and helping them prepare. So these are great ways of looking at learner readiness and seeing what they can manage. It's what I said right at the beginning. other studies technology test students, I'm not quite sure I understand that one, I'm afraid. As part of experience of testing the readiness of students to do problem solving. I'm going to give you my email address, Vladimir, and I'll give my email address to everybody because I can't answer those right now. I'm not 100% sure where you're going with it. So I'm going to give you all, as I promised, my shortest email address because I'm typing it very quickly. I have a business address, but this is the easier one. As I said at the beginning, whether you do the exam or not is entirely up to you. But this material and the design of this test is great for teaching and, very importantly, for formative assessment so that you learn where your learners are comfortable, where they're not comfortable, and you can adjust your teaching accordingly. It gives you great feedback. Feedback is what will allow us to move forward in an effective way. And hopefully some of them will be fun as well. In our language schools, our learners enjoy doing these activities. They don't look at them as being tested. And that's a very important thing at primary level. I have to finish there because time is up. In fact, I've overrun. I always worry about not having enough, and I always overrun. Thank you for your comments. If there's anything you'd like to pursue further, please contact me at the email address. If you're interested in our primary level courses, please go to Prosvещение website. And if there's anything else we can help you with, please drop us a line. Later this afternoon, I'll be discussing some more secondary level stuff. We'll be looking at writing specifically and at communication skills in general later this afternoon. If you can be with us, then that'll be great. But for now, thank you very much indeed, and goodbye.